Commander HFY sat in the cold metal chair, his 4 purple arms chained to the table. The lights above him buzzed and flickered. 3 judges from different alien races stared at him from across the room. Their faces showed no emotion. They. Recording device on the table blinked red. "State your name and rank for the record," said the lead judge, a tall being with gray skin and no hair. "Commander HFY of the Korthuk Empire, former commander of the Third Fleet." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "You are here to give testimony about the war with the humans. Begin when you are ready." HFY looked down at his hands. They were shaking. He had been a warrior for 300 years. He had fought in 27 different wars. He had conquered worlds and destroyed entire fleets. But when he thought about the humans, his hands still shook. "You want to know why we surrendered," he said slowly. "Why the mighty Korthuk Empire, rulers of 47 star systems, begged for peace from a species that had barely left their home world. You want to know why we were afraid." He paused and took a deep breath. The air in the room tasted like metal and fear. "I will tell you, but first you must understand something. We thought we knew war. We had rules. We had honor. We had codes that every civilized species followed. The Vorthan Empire fought with energy weapons and shields. The Zealot Confederation used plasma cannons and boarding parties. The Thraxi built massive ships and fought in formation. Everyone followed the same basic rules." HFY's eyes grew distant as he remembered. "When our scouts first detected the human homeworld, we laughed. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel. Their ships were tiny. Their weapons were primitive. We expected them to surrender as soon as they saw our fleet. Most species did. It was logical. Why fight when you cannot win?" The recording device continued to blink. The judges waited. "The first human ship we encountered was near their Centauri colony. It was small, maybe 50 crew members. Our battlecruiser was 10 times larger. We sent the standard message: surrender and join the Empire, or be destroyed. Most species chose to surrender." HFY's voice grew quieter. The humans sent back a message. It was just 2 words: "Come and take it." Our translator systems needed several minutes to understand what they meant. When we finally did, we thought it was a mistake. No species with such primitive technology would dare challenge us. He shifted in his chair. The chains around his arms clinked softly. "We disabled their ship with our ion cannons. Standard procedure. We sent boarding parties to secure the vessel and take prisoners. The humans would make good slaves, we thought. They looked strong enough for manual labor." The commander's compound eyes began to twitch. The boarding party was led by Captain Thekmer, one of our best officers. He had captured over 200 enemy vessels in his career. He knew how to handle frightened crews. He expected the humans to be cowering in their quarters, waiting to be processed. HFY stopped talking. He stared at the wall behind the judges. Minutes passed in silence. What happened next? Asked the lead judge. The humans were not cowering. They were waiting, armed with primitive projectile weapons and explosive devices. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they had rigged their own ship to explode. The judges looked at each other. One of them, a being with tentacles instead of arms, leaned forward. They were willing to destroy their own vessel? Not just willing, eager. The human captain, a man named Jake Morrison, was dying from wounds he had received in the first attack. He was lying on the bridge, bleeding their red blood all over the floor. When Captain Thekmer found him, the human was holding a small device in his hand. HFY's voice began to crack. Captain Thekmer demanded that the human surrender. He pointed his weapon at the man's head. But the human just smiled. He was smiling as he died. He looked at Captain Neckmer and said, "Welcome to hell." Then he pressed the button. The room fell silent except for the buzzing of the lights. The explosion killed everyone on board both ships. Captain Neckmer, his entire boarding party, and all 50 humans. We lost 200 of our best soldiers to capture one small vessel. And in the end, we captured nothing. HFY looked directly at the judges. That should have been our first warning. That should have told us that these humans were different. But we were proud. We were the Korthic Empire. We had never been defeated. We thought it was just one crazy captain. We thought the rest of their species would be more reasonable. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. We were wrong. So very wrong. The humans were not reasonable. They were not civilized. They did not follow the rules of war. They made their own rules. And their rules were simple. If they could not win, they would make sure we could not win either. The recording. Device continued to blink. The judges waited for him to continue. The next encounter was worse. Much worse. It was at their colony on Proxima. We brought a full battle fleet. 300 ships. 50,000 soldiers. We surrounded the planet. We cut off all escape routes. We gave them one last chance to surrender. HFY's hands were shaking harder now. They sent back a message. It was broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship in our fleet could hear it. A human female, their colony leader, spoke directly to us. She said, "We know you are stronger. We know you have more ships. We know we cannot defeat you in open battle. But we can make you pay a price that you will never forget." The commander stopped talking again. He looked at his hands, watching them shake. What was the price? Asked the lead judge. HFY looked up, his eyes filled with something that might have been fear. Everything. The price was everything. The humans were willing to pay any price to hurt us. And they expected us to pay the same price to defeat them. But we were not willing to pay that price. We wanted to conquer, not to destroy ourselves in the process. He paused. That was the difference between us and the humans. We fought to win. They fought to survive. And a species fighting for survival will do things that a species fighting for conquest never would. The recording device blinked, red in the silence that followed. The lead judge gestured for HFY to continue. The alien commander's breathing was heavy, like he had been running. His purple skin had turned darker, almost black in some places. "The Battle of Proxima Station," he said slowly. "That was where we learned the true nature of human warfare. That was where we first saw what they were really capable of." HFY closed his eyes, but opened them quickly. Even in darkness, he could see the memories. We approached the station with confidence. It was a small mining outpost, maybe 10,000 humans. Our fleet had 50,000 soldiers. We had the best weapons in the galaxy. We had ion cannons that could cut through any armor. We had boarding pods that could drill through any hull. We had done this 1,000 times before. He paused and looked at the water cup on the table. His hands were shaking too much to pick it up. The human commander was a woman named Lisa Rodriguez. She sent us a message before we attacked. She was young, maybe 30 years old in human terms. She looked calm, too calm. She said, "Commander, you are about to learn why humans have survived on a world where everything tried to kill us for millions of years." HFY's voice became quieter. We laughed at her. A world where everything tried to kill them? How bad could it be? We had conquered species that lived on worlds with poisonous air. We had defeated races that lived in the crushing depths of gas giants. How dangerous could one small planet be? The judges waited. The recording device continued to blink. We began our attack at dawn, their time, standard procedure. We destroyed their defense platforms first. Then we cut off their communications. Then we sent boarding parties to secure key areas. Everything went according to plan. Zeftai shifted in his chair. The chains clinked again. The first boarding party landed in the station's main dock. 50 of our best soldiers, led by Captain Vexdal. They found the dock empty. No humans, no defenses. Just empty space and silence. Captain Vexdal reported that it was too easy. He was right. The commander's compound eyes began to twitch again. The humans were not defending the dock. They were not defending anything. They had pulled back to the center of the station. Captain Vexdal followed standard procedure. He secured the area and called for reinforcements. 200 more soldiers joined him. They began to move toward the station's core. Zeftai stopped talking. He stared at the table for a long time. They never made it. The humans had turned the entire outer ring of the station into a trap. They had removed the life support systems. They had weakened the hull plating. They had planted explosives in the walls, the floors, the ceiling, everywhere. His voice became a whisper. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they had left their own people behind. Human civilians, men, women, children. They were tied up in the corridors like bait. When our soldiers found them, they tried to help. It is against our code to harm civilians. We are warriors, not monsters. The lead judge leaned forward. What happened to your soldiers? The humans had rigged the civilians with explosives. Not just any explosives. Chemical weapons, biological agents, radiation sources. When our soldiers tried to untie them, they triggered the devices. The entire outer ring of the station was flooded with poison gas. 300 of our soldiers died in minutes. Zeftai's hands were shaking so hard that he could not hold them still. We tried to retreat. We tried to evacuate our surviving soldiers. But the humans had planned for that too. They had hidden more soldiers in the evacuation routes. Humans with primitive weapons, but they knew the station better than we did. They knew every pipe, every vent, every maintenance tunnel. He looked at the judges with fear in his eyes. A human soldier named Ben Clark crawled through the waste disposal system for 6 hours. 6 hours in toxic sludge and human waste. He came up behind our command post and killed 12 officers with explosive charges. He died in the explosion, but he took our communication center with him. The recording device blinked red. The judges said nothing. Another human, a female named Amy Foster, sealed herself in the station's reactor room. She had enough explosives to destroy the entire station. She sent us a message. You have 10 minutes to get your people off this station. After that, everyone dies. Zeftai's voice cracked. We tried to negotiate. We told her we would spare the remaining civilians if she surrendered. We told her we would give her people good treatment. We offered her rank in our military. We offered her riches. We offered her anything she wanted. He stopped talking and looked at the wall. What did she say? Asked the judge with tentacles. She sighed. The only thing I want is to watch you burn. Then she started, counting down from 10, 9, 8, 7. Our soldiers ran for their ships. 6, 5, 4. We barely made it to minimum safe distance. 3, 2, 1. The room fell silent. The explosion destroyed the entire station. Every human on board died. All of them. 10,000 people. They killed themselves to kill 800 of our soldiers. They traded 10,000 lives for 800. Zeftai looked directly at the judges. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that it worked. Our soldiers were terrified. They had never seen anything like it. They had never fought an enemy that was willing to die just to hurt them. They had never faced warriors who used their own civilians as weapons. He paused. After Proxima Station, everything changed. Our soldiers began to hesitate before entering human ships. They began to scan for explosives before helping human civilians. They began to expect traps everywhere. The humans had gotten inside our heads. The commander's voice became barely audible. And the humans were just getting started. Proxima Station was not their most terrible weapon. It was just their warning shot. They were telling us that they were willing to do anything to win. Anything at all. The recording device blinked in the silence that followed. The judges looked at each other with expressions of horror and disbelief. The judges waited as Zeftai wiped sweat from his face. His purple skin was covered in moisture, and his breathing was shallow. The recording device continued to blink red in the silent room. After Proxima Station, we thought we understood them. He said finally, "We thought we knew how the humans fought. We prepared for more explosions. We prepared for more traps. We prepared for more suicide attacks, but we were wrong again. The humans were not done teaching us about war." Zeftai's 4 arms trembled as he spoke. 3 months after Proxima, we captured a human supply ship near the Vega system. It was a routine operation. The ship was damaged and could not escape. The crew surrendered without a fight. 50 humans, all wearing their military uniforms. They came quietly. They did not resist. They followed our orders. He paused and looked at his hands. We brought them to our main base on Kepler Station. We put them in the prisoner section. We gave them food and water. We treated them according to galactic law. We even gave them medical care for their wounded. We thought we were being civilized. The lead judge leaned forward. What happened? For 2 weeks, nothing. The humans behaved like model prisoners. They followed the rules. They caused no trouble. They even helped maintain their own cells. Our guards began to relax. Some of them even started to like the humans. They talked to them. They shared stories. They played games. Zeftai's voice became quieter. Then the sounds started. At first, it was just at night. Soft sounds. Whispers. Crying. Our guards thought it was the humans talking to each other. Normal prisoner behavior. But the sounds got louder and stranger. He stopped talking and stared at the wall. "What kind of sounds?" asked the judge with gray skin. "Laughter. Human laughter, but not happy laughter. The kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl. And singing. Children singing. But there were no children on the station. And the crying. Always the crying. It never stopped." Zeftai's compound eyes began to twitch. Our guards started to have trouble sleeping. They would hear the sounds even when they were off duty, even when they were away from the prisoner section. The laughter followed them. The singing followed them. The crying followed them. The room was silent except for the buzzing of the lights. We checked the human cells. All 50 prisoners were accounted for. They were all sleeping. But the sounds continued. We checked the recording systems. Nothing. We checked for hidden speakers. Nothing. We checked for electronic devices. Nothing. Zeftai's voice cracked. Then our guards started to disappear. One by one. First it was Private Kekstar. He was found in his quarters, dead. No wounds. No signs of struggle. He looked like he had died of fear. His eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. His mouth was open like he was screaming, but no sound came out. The judges looked at each other with concern. The next night, Corporal Thyvin disappeared. We found him 3 days later in the station's air recycling system. He was alive, but he could not speak. He could not move. He just stared at nothing and made soft, whimpering sounds. The doctors said his mind was broken. Zeftai's hands were shaking harder now. We increased security. We put cameras everywhere. We doubled the guards. We armed everyone, but it did not help. Every night, another guard would disappear or die or go insane. And every night, the humans, in their cells, would sleep peacefully. He paused and took a shuddering breath. We interrogated the human prisoners. We demanded to know how they were doing it. They just looked at us with innocent faces. They said they did not know what we were talking about. They said they were just trying to survive. They said they were not doing anything wrong. The recording device blinked in the silence, but we knew they were lying. We knew they were doing something. We just could not figure out what. So we decided to watch them. We put our best intelligence officer, Colonel Mexkai, in charge of the investigation. He was a professional. He had broken enemy codes before. He had caught spies. He had solved impossible mysteries. Zeftai's voice became barely audible. Colonel Mexkai lasted 4 days. On the 4th night, we found him in the human prisoner section. He was standing in front of their cells, talking to them, but he was not speaking our language. He was speaking human language, words we had never heard before, and he was crying. The judges waited for him to continue. When we tried to approach him, he turned around and looked at us. His eyes were human eyes. Not the shape, but the expression. Cold and calculating and completely without fear. He smiled at us with a human smile. Then he pulled out his weapon and killed himself. The room fell silent. That was when we realized the truth. The humans were not just prisoners. They were weapons. They were fighting a war inside our heads. They were using our own minds against us. They were making us afraid of shadows and sounds and empty spaces. Zeftai looked directly at the judges. We evacuated Kepler Station. We left the human prisoners behind. We sealed the station and marked it as contaminated. But it was too late. The fear had spread. Our soldiers began to see human faces in empty corridors. They began to hear human voices in the walls. They began to feel human eyes watching them in the darkness. He paused. The humans had weaponized fear itself. They had turned our own imagination against us. They had made us afraid of being afraid. And the worst part was that we never found out how they did it. We never found their hidden devices, or their secret messages, or their mind control technology. His voice became a whisper. Maybe there was no technology. Maybe they just understood something about fear that we did not. Maybe they knew that the strongest weapon is not the one that kills the body, but the one that kills the will to fight. The recording device blinked red in the terrifying silence that followed. Zeftai sat in silence for several minutes. The judges could hear his breathing, fast and shallow. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, broken, like something inside him had shattered and never healed. The Battle of the Titan Nebula, he said slowly. That was the end. That was where we learned that humans do not just fight wars. They fight for the right to exist. And there is no force in the universe more dangerous than a species fighting for its right to exist. He looked at the recording device, then at the judges. We had cornered the human fleet. 300 of their ships trapped in the nebula, with no way to escape. We had 2,000 ships surrounding them. Admiral Ryan Garcia was their commander. A young man, maybe 40 years old. He had never lost a battle, but he had never faced odds like this. Zeftai's hands stopped shaking. They went completely still, like he was holding something fragile. Our fleet commander, Admiral Vekwar, sent the standard surrender message. He offered the humans good terms. They could join our empire as citizens, not slaves. They could keep their ships and their weapons. They could even keep their own government on their home worlds. It was a generous offer. Most species would have accepted. The alien commander's compound eyes focused on something far away. Admiral Garcia sent back a message. It was broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship in both fleets could hear it. He said, "Admiral Vekwar, You have offered us our lives, but you have not offered us our freedom. And humans without freedom are not really alive." Zeftai paused. We thought it was just words. Brave words from a defeated enemy. We had heard such speeches before. But then something happened that we had never seen in all our years of war. Something that still haunts my dreams. The recording device blinked red. The judges waited. The human ships began to broadcast. Not military communications, personal messages. Human soldiers talking to their families back on Earth. A captain named Paul Davis spoke to his wife and children. He told them he loved them. He told them to be strong. He told them to remember him. Zeftai's voice became quieter. A lieutenant named Sandra Kim sang a song to her mother, an old human song about going home. She sang it while tears ran down her face. She knew she would never see her mother again, but she sang anyway. The alien commander looked at his hands. Hundreds of messages, thousands of voices, all saying goodbye, all saying they loved someone, all saying they would never surrender. We listened to every word. We could not help ourselves. We had never heard anything like it. He stopped talking and stared at the table. What happened next? Asked the lead judge. They charged. 300 ships against 2,000. They did not try to run. They did not try to hide. They flew straight at us, singing their songs and saying their prayers and telling their families they loved them. Zeftai's voice cracked, but that was not the worst part. The worst part was what they did to our ships. They did not just attack us. They rammed us. Ship after ship, they crashed into our vessels at full speed. They turned their ships into missiles. They turned their crews into weapons. The judges looked at each other with horror. A human destroyer, the Earth's Pride, crashed into our flagship. The impact killed everyone on both ships. But before it hit, the human captain, a man named Alex Turner, sent one last message. He said, "This is for every human child who will never have to bow to an alien master." Zeftai's hands began to shake again. A human cruiser, the Liberty Bell, was crippled by our fire. It was drifting helplessly. We thought it was finished. But the humans did something we had never seen before. They ejected their life pods, but not to escape. They filled the pods with explosives and used them as guided missiles. The ship's commander, a woman named Rachel Stone, stayed on the bridge and manually guided each pod to its target. He paused and wiped sweat from his face. She destroyed 6 of our ships before we finally silenced her. But even then, she was not done. As her ship was breaking apart, she activated its self-destruct sequence. She gave us exactly 60 seconds to abandon our nearby ships or be caught in the explosion. The recording device blinked in the silence. She was not threatening us. She was warning us. She was giving us a chance to escape. Even in her final moments, even as she was dying, she was still thinking about the rules of war. She was still trying to be civilized. Zeftai looked directly at the judges. That was when we realized the truth. The humans were not monsters. They were not savages. They were warriors fighting for something they believed in. They were willing to die for their beliefs. They were willing to kill for their beliefs. But they were not willing to abandon their beliefs. His voice became barely audible. We had 60 seconds to decide. We could stay and fight and die with honor, or we could retreat and live with shame. Most of our ships retreated, but some stayed. They died with the humans in a ball of fire that lit up the entire nebula. He stopped talking and looked at the wall. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, we had won. We controlled the battlefield. We had destroyed the human fleet. But we had lost something more important. We had lost our will to fight. We had seen what humans were capable of. We had seen what they were willing to sacrifice. Zeftai's voice became a whisper. Admiral Garcia's ship was the last to die. It was broken and burning, but it was still fighting, still broadcasting, still singing. When it finally exploded, the light was so bright that it blinded our sensors for several minutes. The recording device blinked red in the terrible silence that followed. The recording device blinked red in the silent room. HFY stared at the table for a long time. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His breathing was so quiet that the judges could barely hear it. After the Titan Nebula, everything changed. He said finally, "We had won the battle, but we had lost something else. Something more important than ships or soldiers or territory. We had lost our belief that we could defeat the humans." He looked up at the judges with hollow eyes. The survivors from the human fleet were few. Maybe 50 people from 300 ships. We captured them and brought them to our prison ships. We expected them to be broken. We expected them to be defeated. We expected them to beg for mercy. HFY's voice was flat, emotionless. They did not beg. They did not cry. They did not even seem afraid. They looked at us with calm eyes and waited. A human lieutenant named Chris Morgan was among them. He had burns covering half his body. His ship had been destroyed around him. He should have been dead. The alien commander paused. I went to see him personally. I wanted to understand how humans could fight like that. I wanted to know what made them so willing to die. I thought maybe if I understood them, I could figure out how to defeat them. He shifted in his chair. Lieutenant Morgan was sitting in his cell, staring at the wall. I asked him why the humans fought so hard, why they chose death over surrender, why they destroyed themselves rather than accept our rule. The judges waited. He looked at me with those strange human eyes, blue eyes like the sky on their home world. He said, "Commander, have you ever read about human history?" I told him I had studied their military records. He shook his head. He said, "Not our wars, our survival." HFY's hands began to shake. Again, then he told me stories. Stories about the human home world, about creatures called lions that hunted in packs, about snakes with poison that could kill in minutes, about tiny insects that carried diseases, about plants that were deadly to touch, about weather that could freeze or burn or drown anything that lived. The recording device continued to blink. He told me about human history, about how they had fought each other for thousands of years, about weapons that could destroy entire cities, about wars that killed millions, about something called mutually assured destruction, where both sides had enough weapons to kill everyone on their planet. HFY's voice became quieter. He said, "Commander, we spent 10,000 years learning how to survive on a world that was trying to kill us. We spent another 10,000 years learning how to kill each other. We built weapons that could end all life on our planet. We pointed them at ourselves and lived with the knowledge that we could destroy everything we had ever built." The alien commander stopped talking and stared at the wall. Then he said something that still haunts me. He said, "We made extinction our final weapon. We decided that if we could not live free, then no one would live at all. We were ready to destroy ourselves rather than be conquered by anyone." The judges looked at each other with growing horror. I asked him if he was threatening us, if the humans would destroy their own planet rather than surrender. He smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was almost sad. He said, "Commander, we already have the weapons. We have had them for centuries. Every human child grows up knowing that we can end everything if we choose to." HFY's voice cracked. Then he told me about their other wars, about something called the Second World War, where they fought an enemy that wanted to enslave them, about how they chose to fight for 6 years rather than surrender, about how they built weapons that could split atoms and use them to end the war. He paused and looked at his hands. He said, "We did not want to use those weapons. But we were willing to use them. We were willing to kill millions of our own enemies to save ourselves. What do you think we would do to save our children? The recording device blinked in the silence. That was when I understood. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were fighting for survival. And a species that had survived on a world like theirs, that had built weapons capable of destroying themselves, that had lived with the threat of extinction for centuries, would never surrender to anyone. HFY looked directly at the judges. I sent a message to Admiral Vec that night. I told him we had to end the war. I told him the humans would never surrender. I told him they would keep fighting until everyone was dead, them and us. His voice became barely audible. The Admiral asked me if I was afraid. I told him yes. I was afraid. We were all afraid. We were fighting a species that had made peace with death. They were not afraid to die because they had been living with the possibility of extinction their entire lives. He stopped talking and stared at the recording device. 3 days later, Admiral Vec sent a message to Earth. He offered to negotiate. A peace treaty. The humans accepted. Not because they were defeated, but because they had proven their point. They had shown us that they would never be conquered. HFY's voice became a whisper. The war ended 18 months after it began. We signed the treaty on a neutral station. The human representative was a woman named Julie Adams. She had lost her husband in the Titan Nebula. She looked at our delegation with those calm human eyes and said, "We hope this war taught you something about us." He paused. It did. It taught us that some species are too dangerous to conquer. Some species would rather die than live as slaves. Some species have weapons that can destroy everything, and they are willing to use them. The recording device blinked red. You asked me why we surrendered to the humans. The answer is simple. We surrendered because we wanted to live. And the humans had shown us that they were perfectly willing to ensure that nobody lived if they could not be free. HFY looked at the judges one final time. Human warfare was not hell. Hell has rules. Hell has limits. Human warfare was something far worse. It was the willingness to choose extinction over slavery. It was the courage to embrace death, rather, than surrender freedom. It was survival raised to the level of an art form. The recording device stopped blinking. The testimony was complete.